The final basket that I want to talk about is Ukraine. My amendment 1206 strips all the Ukraine money out of this bill, about $300 million. And what I think you've heard from people who feel strongly on the Ukraine issue is that these should be divided questions. I know that I'm in the minority of the majority with my view on the Ukraine war. I'm in the minority when it comes to the overall House of Representatives. But this issue of whether or not the United States should continue to be involved in this war in Ukraine should not be commingled with these other critical questions about how we're going to operate the Department of Defense. Whether you're for the war in Ukraine or you're against the war in Ukraine and the U.S. involvement, it at least is an issue that deserves its own dignity and its own vote. And the National Defense Authorization Act should not have to carry the Ukraine funding as an anchor. There's a second Ukraine amendment that I have that's a bit more targeted, amendment number 326, and this deals with end-use monitoring. Okay, so when we had the Inspector General before us and we asked questions in the committee, are we complying with end-use monitoring when it comes to Ukraine? They could not answer the question yes. So the only thing that Amendment 326 requires is a certification by the Secretary of Defense that we are following our own laws when it comes to end-use monitoring of this equipment. We know we haven't done it right the whole time. I think we should at least have to certify that we're following the law as we're sending weapons of war into a killing zone. And the final amendment I'll ask you to support is one where I join my colleague, Ms. Jacobs, and the ranking member of the Rules Committee to stop the exportation of cluster bombs. Mr. McGovern had a freestanding piece of legislation on this that I think correctly laid out what the international norms are regarding cluster bombs. And as I've heard our colleagues who support this decision defend cluster bombs, it seems to fall into two categories. One, well, Russia's using them and has them. Just because Russia has something, we're going to give it to Ukraine. What are we going to send tactical nuclear weapons next? Since the point that my colleague Mr. Davidson made, is the objective here to get Ukraine on some sort of military parity with Russia? If so, the cluster bombs would seem like a bizarre place to start anyway. And then the second argument made in favor of the cluster bombs is, well, they're only going to use them in their own country. How craven and depraved is that? We are still cleaning up cluster bombs now in Laos because of the high dud rate. These things go down, and you're going to have children with lost limbs and parents that they don't have anymore because of this decision. And the fact that a country is willing to use it within their own boundaries in no way absolves us of the responsibility of sending them there when those folks die. So I hope you'll consider that as a bipartisan amendment as well, and I yield back.
Thank you very much.